4:30 starts now.
Well, good afternoon and thanks for joining us. I'm Elise Snowy. Chris is off today, a week after that shocking collapse of the state's $1.8 billion tax deal. Two of the senators who voted against it are speaking out. Matt Smith gives us a preview of his conversation for Upfront Fridays. But we begin with a first alert update on the massive storms and flooding from last month. Governor Evers today announcing he has formally requested a disaster declaration from President Trump. A joint assessment by Wisconsin Emergency Management and FEMA determined there was more than $27 million in damage. If the president does approve the request, homeowners and renters will be able to apply on their own for FEMA funding. Now, that request covers these 21 counties as well as the Oneida Nation for either FEMA individual assistance funds for affected residents and families, FEMA public assistance grants for emergency work and infrastructure repairs, or both. He also requested funding from the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program to help reduce the impact of the future disaster for the entire state. In his announcement of today's request, the governor did bring up that he's still trying to get answers from the Trump administration for why they denied public assistance grants for severe storms last summer, which caused $27 million in damage to public infrastructure. The Trump administration did approve individual assistance for those storms.